Hello, here we are, healing the child within. Today, we're on chapter 8. Why don't we carry on? Chapter 8, how can we heal our child within? To rediscover our true or real self and heal our child within, we can begin a process that involves the following of 4 actions. 1. Discover and practice being our real self or child within. 2. Identify our ongoing physical, mental, emotional, spiritual needs. Practice getting these needs met with safe and supportive people. 3. Identify, re-experience, and grieve the pain of our ungrieved losses or traumas in the presence of safe and supporting people. 4. Identify and work through our core issues described below. These actions are closely related, although not listed in any particular order. Working on them, and thereby healing our child within, generally occurs in a circular fashion, with work and discovery in one area a link to another area. Stages in the process of recovery. Survival. To get to the point of recovery, we must survive. Survivors, by necessity, codependents. What? Survivors are by necessity codependents. This book is from 1984, Healing the Child Within. To get to the point of recovery, we must survive. Survivors are, by necessity, codependents. We use many coping skills and ego defenses to do this. Children of alcoholics and from other troubled or dysfunctional families survive by dodging, hiding, negotiating, taking care of others, pretending, denying, and learning, and adapting to stay alive using any methods that work. They learn often other unhealthy ego defense mechanisms, as described by Anna Freud. F-R-E-U-D is Freud, right? And summarized by Vaillant. These include intellectualization, repression, disassociation, displacement, and reaction formation, all of which, if overused, can be considered to be neurotic. The projection, passive-aggressive, and all of which, if overused, can be considered to be neurotic. And projection, passive-aggressive behavior, acting out, hypochondriasis, grandiosity, and denial, all of which, if overused, can be considered immature and, at times, psychotic. While these defenses are functional in our dysfunctional family, they tend to work poorly for us as adults. When we attempt to participate in a healthy relationship, they tend not to further our best interests. Using them stifles and stunts our child within and promotes and reinforces our false or codependent self. Ginny was a 21-year-old woman who grew up in an alcoholic family. In the beginning of her recovery, she wrote the following poem. It exemplifies some of the pain in the survival stages. Afraid of the night. Like a child waiting in the night for warm hands and arms to wrap themselves around her loneliness, to spend herself in tears of sudden safety and of love. I, too, in the dark aloneness of self unloved, unanchored, abandoned, and denied, still summon with silent child cries the ancient hope, the old, sure magic of wantedness. The child still lives in me, with that eager hurt of innocence bewildered and betrayed. Ah, that pitiful paradox, to sense the rescue and to know there is none, but driven by old dreams, pale yet powerful, remembrances of a soft, dear touch of love. I wait, one waits, one always waits. It is forgotten that nameless need the years have beaten from my wasted heart. But like some unshaped primeval force, it beckons, crowds my reality. It beckons, crowds my reality, blunts stiff reason. And I am grotesque with helpless waiting, with helpless wanting, turning my mind inwards, backwards. Dull, too, is pain with young memories that weaken and defy, submit, then die. I do not live, I wait in such unhope. Here Ginny tells us about her pain, numbness, isolation, and hopelessness. Yet she also reflects one ray of potential hope in the line, "The child still lives in me." Part of the recovery is to discover ourselves, our child, and how we use these ineffective means of relating to ourselves, to others, and to the universe. This can be most productively accomplished during the working stages of recovery. While it is clear that we are surviving, it is also true that we experience a good deal of pain and suffering, or we become numb, or we alternate between suffering and numbness. Slowly, we become aware that these very skills and defenses that allowed us to survive as mistreated infants, children, and adolescents do not work well when we try to have healthy, intimate relationships as adults. It is the frustration of this mistreatment, that suffering of codependence, and this failure in our relationships that do not work for us, that push and at times even force us to begin looking elsewhere than these ineffective methods. That looking elsewhere can trigger our recovery. Gravitz and Bowden, 1985, describe recovery in their ACOA patients as occurring in 6 stages: survival, emergent awareness, core issues, transformations, integrations, genesis, or spirituality. These stages parallel the 4 stages of life, growth, and transformation described by Ferguson in 1980, and the 3 stages of classical mythological hero or heroine's journey as described by Campbell in 1946 and by others. That is interesting work, right? Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, Finding the Hero Within, whatever it's called. Definitely interesting archetype for life. I suggest it. The Hero's Journey. I used to teach it when I was an English teacher for 4 years. The Hero's Journey. Percy Jackson's Lightning Thief. Every story, literally every story that is coherent and cohesive follows the hero's journey. Start in the light of a familiar. Something bad happens. Go into the darkness, face the challenge. Overcome the challenge, come back to the original starting point with a new outlook. And the original starting point can be a physical place, can be a mental place, can be really any old familiar place, but now new, now seen through the experience of that darkness on the underbelly of your hero's journey, which is cyclical like a circle. We can clarify and summarize the similarities of each approach as follows. Survival leads to emergent awareness, which leads to core issues, which leads to transformations, which leads to integration, which leads to genesis or spirituality. Another continuum. Awakening leads to exploration, leads to integration, leads to being. And finally, according to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, separation leads to initiation, leads to return. As I said, return, right? You come back to the thing that you started at. You return, but with new experience. Each stage is useful in healing our child within. Each stage often recognized only in retrospect. When we are in the stage, we do not always realize that we are there. This is one reason why it is helpful to have a sponsor, guide, counselor, or therapist during recovery. A therapy group that uses principles of ACOA recovery described in this book and elsewhere can be especially helpful. Awakening. Emergent awareness. Awakening is the first glimpse that things or reality are not what we thought. Awakening is an ongoing process through recovery. To begin, we generally require an entry point or trigger, anything that shakes up our old understanding or belief system of reality, of the way that we thought things were. Because our true self is so hidden, and because our false or codependent self is so prominent, awakening may not come as easily. Nonetheless, it often happens. I have witnessed this process in hundreds of children of trauma. The entry point or trigger may range across a wide spectrum. It may start with hearing or reading someone describe their own recovery or self or true self, or being sick and tired of suffering, or beginning to work seriously on another problem in counseling or therapy. For others, it may be attending to self-help meetings or educational experiences, reading books, or hearing about it from a friend. At this time, we often begin to experience confusion, fear, enthusiasm, excitement, sadness, numbness, and anger. These mean that we are beginning to feel again. We begin to get in touch with who we really are, our child within, our real self. At this point, some people will give up, will go no further. They find it easier and more comfortable to retreat back into their false or codependent self, i.e., into a relapse or codependence, because these feelings are frightening. Those who are recovering alcoholic or other drug dependent or dependent upon other unproductive behavior, such as overeating or compulsive gambling, may begin to experience a relapse, or they may participate in another form of shame-based compulsive behavior, such as spending money that they do not have. But this awakening can be an opportunity to take risks or to plunge into discovery of our own whole self, our aliveness, and even eventually our happiness. Finding help. At this point, it is helpful to find a sponsor, counselor, or therapist to help us discover and heal our child within. The recovering person, however, is usually so vulnerable that often related to the confusion, fear, and enthusiasm and or resistance of recovery, that he or she might find a sponsor or clinician who has not worked through his or her own recovery of their child within. If that person cannot get his or her own needs met, he or she may use the newly awakened person to meet some of these needs. The result is that the patient, client, student, or pigeon is traumatized again, resulting in a vicious cycle of unresolved trauma and a return to the false self. Guidelines. The following are guidelines to finding a sponsor, therapist, counselor who will usually tend to be helpful rather than harmful. The person will tend to have 1. Demonstrable training and experience. For example, a clinician or therapist has training and experience in helping people grow mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, as well as being effective in helping with specific problems and conditions such as being an ACOA or AC, adult child of a troubled family. 2. Non-dogmatic, rigid, or judgmental. 3. No promises of quick fixes or answers. 4. While you sense that they genuinely care about you as a human being and about your recovery and growth, they are firm enough to push you to do your own work toward recovery. 5. Provide some of your needs. Listening, mirroring, echoing, safety, respect, understanding, and acceptance of your feelings during a therapy session. 6. Encouraging and helping you learn to find ways outside of therapy sessions to get your needs met in a healthy way. And 7. They are well progressed in healing their own child within. Number 8. They do not use you to get their needs met. This may be difficult to detect. And finally, number 9. You feel safe and relatively comfortable with them. Occasionally, a friend during a recovery has many of these qualities. However, a friend or relative is not forced to listen with full attention and is generally not trained in helping you with your specific problems. Friends and relatives may want you to for their needs, sometimes in unhealthy or unconstructive ways. And some friends or relatives, usually unconsciously, will sooner or later betray you or reject you. You may end up feeling toxic or crazy. Being close to these unrecovered people is generally not safe. Avoid them when possible. It will probably take some time before you can trust the process of therapy and recovery enough so that you feel okay about taking risks to begin exposing your true self. Give yourself that time. For some, the time needed will be relatively short, a matter of weeks. For others, it may take longer than a year. It is important to share these fears with your therapist and not withhold them. Taking this one step breaks the pattern of denying feeling that you learned as a child. As you feel a sense of trust, you can begin the former risk of talking about your innermost secrets, fears, and concerns. I have described the healing power of telling our story in alcoholism and spirituality, and others have also described it. Whether in individual or group therapy, it is helpful to talk, even if at first you may stutter or ramble. Feel free to ask your counselor, therapist, group leader, or group member for feedback about how you came across. No matter what type of therapy you choose, it is definitely helpful to do some work on recovery on your own, outside of the session. This can include activities from wondering, considering, questioning, and exploring various ideas and possibilities. To keep a diary or a journal, to telling your dreams to trusted people, to working through conflicts with others. Eventually, when you talk to others about yourself, it is useful to your recovery that you begin to become clearer and briefer, especially if you are in a therapy group or self-help group. This is a truism in counseling that people in therapy generally relate to and behave in some the same or similar ways that they behave outside of therapy. It may be helpful in recovery to ask your therapist to group how you are doing in this area. Finally, there is an issue of transference in therapy, which includes your feelings and conflicts around your relationship with your counselor, therapist, or group. Take a risk and express exactly how you feel, even if angry, shameful, guilty, or whatever. No matter how unimportant it might seem at first to you, keep telling yourself that your feelings are okay, despite your fears that they are bad or unjustified. Once you feel trusting enough so that you can risk self-disclosure in recovery, you are usually ready to begin conscious work on some of your core issues. Thank you. That was Chapter 8 of Healing the Child Within, 1984. Goodbye.